The morning didn't feel urgent. There were plans, schedules, a belief that the day would unfold the way it always did. At some point, one person didn't arrive where she was expected to be. Not in a way that caused panic. Not at first. But by the time the absence was taken seriously, a story had already begun to form. No alarms, no warning, just the assumption that routine could be trusted. Her name was Lori Hacking. Lori was expected to be seen again, expected to show up, expected to continue a life that already had plans attached to it. Nothing about that morning suggested it would become a search. When she didn't arrive as expected, concern didn't come all at once, came slowly, wrapped in patience and familiar excuses. Everyone assumed there was a reason. Everyone assumed there was time. Most people believed disappearances announce themselves. With urgency, with something clearly wrong. This didn't. And that delay would matter. The place Lori was last known to be wasn't hidden. It wasn't remote. It was a familiar home. The kind people trust without thinking twice. Hours passed. Then another day. And with every delay, the story people told themselves became harder to defend. The person closest to Lori was already part of the picture, close enough to explain the routine, close enough to answer questions. What followed wouldn't unfold all at once. It would come through statements, and a version of events that sounded convincing at first. This case wouldn't hinge on forced entry. It would hinge on trust, and whether that trust was real. Timelines mattered, consistency mattered, and the smallest contradictions would begin to change everything. To understand what happened to Lori Hacking, you have to look closely at the story that was told first, and why it didn't hold. To those who knew her, Lori was defined by gentleness and resolve in equal measure. She grew up in California, raised in a close-knit family that valued education, kindness, and faith. Her childhood was structured but warm, grounded in consistency and expectation. Lori learned early how to be reliable, how to show up, how to follow through, how to care deeply without drawing attention to herself. Friends remembered her as thoughtful and quietly determined. She was not loud. She did not seek the center of attention. She listened carefully, absorbed what people said, and responded with intention. When she spoke, it was measured. When she committed to something, she followed it through. She had a soft presence, but a strong sense of purpose. Lori loved structure. She thrived on routines that brought calm to busy days. Morning walks, carefully planned schedules, lists written neatly in planners. She found comfort in preparation, in order, in the reassurance that comes from knowing what the day holds. This wasn't rigidity, it was stability. She believed that discipline created freedom, that by organizing the small things, life's larger goals could take shape. She approached her education with that same mindset, working steadily toward a future she had imagined for years. One built on honesty, on shared effort, on a partnership that felt solid and transparent. By the summer of 2004, Lori was newly married and living in Utah, far from the California home that had shaped her. Marriage had brought change quickly. A new city, a new environment, a new rhythm to daily life. To the outside world, the transition appeared hopeful, promising. She was beginning a new chapter with someone she trusted completely, someone she believed shared her values and vision for the future. But transitions carry weight. Lori was learning how to balance expectation with reality, how to be a wife while still holding on to her own identity, how to adjust without losing herself. These were quiet negotiations, ones she navigated privately, thoughtfully. She kept close contact with her family. Phone calls were regular. Conversations were detailed. She shared small pieces of daily life. What she studied, what she planned, how she felt about the future. Nothing in those conversations suggested fear. Nothing hinted at danger. Just the ordinary adjustments of adulthood. Just the work of building a life. On the morning of July 19, 2004, Lori planned to take her usual walk. It was part of her routine. A moment of calm before the day unfolded. She dressed simply, comfortably. She left behind personal items she would have taken if she planned to be gone long. Her keys, her identification, the small things that signal intention. She stepped outside expecting to return. She never did. Within hours, concern began to build. Lori was dependable, predictable. She did not miss appointments. She did not disappear without explanation. When she failed to answer her phone, when she did not return home, the absence felt immediate and wrong. This was not like her. By early afternoon, worry had hardened into fear. The question no one wanted to ask was already forming, quietly but insistently. Where was Lori hacking? As the search began to unfold, investigators would slowly come to understand something devastating. That the truth of what happened that morning was not distant, not random, not hidden somewhere unknown. It was far closer to home than anyone imagined, waiting silently behind the walls of the life she trusted most. To understand what happened to Lori hacking, investigators first had to understand the life she was building and the relationship at its center. Lori had married Mark Douglas Hacking just weeks before her disappearance. To friends and family, Mark appeared supportive, attentive, and deeply invested in their future. He spoke confidently about plans ahead, about education, about career paths that would carry them forward together. On the surface, the marriage looked stable, purposeful, well considered, but appearances can be deceiving. Mark was articulate and persuasive, especially when describing his ambitions. He told people he was preparing for medical school, then later law school. He spoke about acceptance letters, entrance exams, long-term goals. Lori believed him. She had no reason not to. Trust, after all, is the foundation of marriage. Behind that confidence, however, were inconsistencies. Small at first. Mark was not enrolled in the programs he claimed. He had not taken the exams he said he had. The academic future he described did not exist. And Lori, quietly and carefully, began to ask questions. Those questions mattered. Investigators would later learn that Lori had recently uncovered the truth. She had discovered that Mark had been lying about his education for years. First to her family, then to her. The deception was not small. It touched every part of the future they had planned together, threatened everything. What happened next unfolded privately, inside the marriage, beyond the view of anyone else. There was no public argument, no dramatic confrontation witnessed by friends. Only a growing tension between what Lori now knew and what Mark had worked so hard to maintain. Fragile balance. A secret exposed. In the days before her disappearance, Lori spoke with her family about concerns she had uncovered. She sounded unsettled but determined. She was not afraid. She was practical. She planned to address the issue, to confront it directly, to decide what came next. Mark, meanwhile, continued to present a calm exterior. He contacted family members. He spoke reassuringly about Lori, about their plans. Nothing in his behavior immediately signaled a crisis. But investigators would later return to this moment again and again. Because when trust collapses, the fallout is rarely visible at first. Simmers, tightens, and sometimes it creates pressure that cannot be released safely. By the time Lori stepped outside for her walk on the morning of July 19th, the truth had already surfaced. The marriage was no longer built on certainty. Something fundamental had shifted. And somewhere in that quiet apartment, between what had been revealed and what could no longer be hidden, the final decisions were already taking shape. When Lori Hacking failed to return from her morning walk, the alarm did not sound all at once. It rose slowly, quietly, in the way concern often does when something feels just slightly off. Mark Hacking was the first to report her missing. He told police that Lori had left their apartment early that morning to go for a walk and never came back. He described what she was wearing, the route she usually took. He appeared worried, cooperative, eager for help. At first glance, his account seemed plausible, but investigators are trained to listen not just to what is said, but to how it is said. Search efforts began quickly. Volunteers combed nearby parks and trails. Police retraced the familiar paths Lori was known to walk. Flyers went up across Salt Lake City. Her face appeared on the news. Friends and family waited, hoping for a call that never came. Then, small inconsistencies began to surface. Detectives learned that Lori had recently confronted Mark about his fabricated academic history. This revelation reframed everything. The disappearance was no longer treated as a simple missing persons case. It was now a potential crime. Police turned their attention inward, toward the apartment. Inside the home, forensic teams worked carefully. Quietly, nothing appeared overturned. There were no obvious signs of a struggle. But absences can be just as revealing as evidence. Items Mark claimed were present did not align with what investigators found. Timelines began to drift apart. Cell phone records placed Mark's movements under scrutiny. His statements about where he had been and when did not fully match the digital trail. Each discrepancy was small on its own. Together, they formed a pattern investigators could not ignore. Under renewed questioning, Mark's story began to change. Days later, the search expanded beyond Utah. Investigators followed new leads, ones that suggested Lori had never left the apartment alive, that her body may have been moved, concealed, disposed of far from the city where she vanished. The turning point came when Mark confessed. He admitted that Lori had confronted him inside their apartment, that the truth about his lies had finally surfaced. He told investigators that during that confrontation, he killed her. What followed, he said, was an attempt to erase what he had done, by transporting her body and disposing of it at a municipal landfill. The confession shifted the case from uncertainty to grim clarity. Search crews were dispatched to the landfill Mark described. 4 days, workers sifted through tons of waste, guided by a narrowing timeline and precise records of disposal routes. It was painstaking work, methodical, and emotionally devastating for those involved. Weeks later, Lori's remains were recovered. The evidence now told a complete story, one that began with trust, collapsed under deception, and ended in irreversible violence. The disappearance that once baffled a city was no longer a mystery, but accountability still lay ahead. Because a confession is only one part of justice, what followed would unfold in a courtroom, where the weight of what had been done would be measured in years, and in consequences that could never truly balance the loss. With Lori Hacking's remains recovered and her husband's confession formally entered into evidence, the case moved out of uncertainty and into resolution. The long search ended, the questions narrowed, and the investigation, which had once relied on hope and fragments, now rested on facts that could not be undone. There were no competing suspects, no alternate theories left standing, no lingering doubt about responsibility. The focus shifted away from what happened and toward what would follow. Mark Douglas Hacking was charged with first-degree murder. In court, the case was presented without spectacle. Prosecutors did not need to dramatize the events. They outlined the timeline carefully, the deception that preceded the crime, the confrontation inside the apartment, the deliberate actions taken afterward to hide what had been done. Each detail was placed in sequence, not to shock but to account. The courtroom atmosphere reflected that restraint. This was not a trial driven by uncertainty or contradiction. It was a reckoning shaped by evidence, admission, and consequence. The legal process unfolded methodically, with an emphasis on responsibility rather than narrative. Mark ultimately pleaded guilty. There was no extended trial, no jury deliberation, no public contest over guilt. The plea acknowledged what investigators had already established and what Lori's family had been forced to confront. The crime had been committed, the loss was permanent, and the law would now respond. Under Utah law, Mark Douglas Hacking was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole. The sentence carried weight, but it also carried limitation. It reflected the seriousness of the crime while acknowledging the structure of the legal system itself. For Lori's loved ones, the ruling marked the end of the courtroom process, but not the end of grief. There was finality, but there was no closure. No legal outcome could restore the future Lori had been building. No sentence could replace the life that had been carefully planned and abruptly taken. The verdict answered who and how, but it could not answer why in any way that made peace possible. In the years since, Lori Hacking has been remembered not for the way her life ended, but for how she lived. Her family has spoken about her kindness, her discipline, her quiet strength, about a young woman committed to honesty, integrity, and hard work. Someone who believed in truth and built her life around it. Someone who trusted deeply, because deception was not part of how she moved through the world. That contrast has never faded. Lori's story has since become a cautionary one, not because of sensational details, but because of what it reveals about deception left unchecked, about how carefully maintained lies can reshape reality, and about how trust, once exploited, can become a weapon rather than a bond. The case also left a lasting impression on the community that searched for her. Volunteers who spent days combing terrain. Investigators who followed leads long after optimism waned. Strangers who held on to hope for someone they had never met. For many of them, Lori's disappearance marked a turning point, a reminder of how fragile safety can be, even inside a home, even within a relationship, even in circumstances that appear ordinary from the outside. Today, Lori Hacking's name is spoken with care, with respect, with remembrance. She is remembered not as a victim alone, but as a person whose life mattered, before, during, and after the case that carried her name into public memory. Because Lori Hacking was more than a headline. She was a daughter, sister, friend, a young woman whose future was real, and whose loss continues to matter. If you found this case fascinating, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. We post crime case videos nightly. Until next time, stay sharp, stay vigilant.